Hey guys, this is Coach Keita Bussey with 180 Firearms Training. I'm here with Mike Seifert and Grant Chancellor Madison, and we're going to talk about USPSA rules versus IPSC rules. So first of all, we'll do an introduction. I'm Keita. I own 180 Firearms Training. I coach competitive shooters all over the world, and I shoot both USPSA and IPSC. I've been doing this for 11 years now and wrote the book Smart Move, Economy of Motion for the Shooting Sports. I teach a movement class called Smart Move and an advanced class called Train Smart. I also have my next book, Train Smart, coming out very soon. Mike, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, how you doing? I'm Mike Seifert. I primarily shoot PCC in USPSA. I've been shooting only for a few years now. I think my first match was in October of 17. And then I started shooting PCC at the end of 18. And primarily just shoot that from the end of 18 until now. I actually have sold all my pistols, and I travel around the country, and yeah, I shoot USPSA matches, and something that I love to do. I'm actually hooked. I played sports for most of my life, and after high school, I was started working, and I was really looking for something to do that was competitive, and I really found a love when I went to my first actually IDPA match. But soon after, found USPSA, and I've pretty much been in love ever since. So anything I can do to get better, it's always the goal. So.
All right, Grant.
Hi, I'm Grant Chancellor Madison. I shoot IPSC in South Africa. I started shooting competitively in 2018, at the end of 2018, and then in October 2019 at Port Elizabeth, I won the standard division at nationals there. Made the South African team for the 2020 World Shoot in standard, and primarily shoot standard division.
All right, and Mike, we did a little training session at Double Eagle Poconos. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, we did actually. I appreciate you waiting for me, first of all. So Keita was nice enough to take some time out, and as soon as I got off of work, I was able to shoot up there, and we did a couple drills together, which was actually really eye-opening. And I take a lot of pride in my movement, especially when you shoot PCC. I feel like shooting is almost secondary to the movement. If you can get around a course of fire efficiently, I feel like that's going to help you more than actually pulling the trigger. So when we went up there, I kind of thought I was going to show Keita a couple things, and well, super wrong on that. Turned out that Keita showed me a few things, and ever since then, I'm always hitting her up with match videos and stuff like, hey Keita, what do you think about how I shot this particular position or something like that? And she's actually been really helpful for my game. So
what was it that really surprised you?
Honestly, if I could explain the stage, I would, but it's like there's a chair on the right hand side, and you got a target right in front of you on the right, and then there's also a target on the left. And I'm like, anybody would assume that you stand up and shoot the target on the right, run to the left, and shoot the other target, and that's the faster way. Well, it certainly was not. So you get up from the chair and you run left, and you take the harder target first. That was extremely eye-opening, and I actually implement that now in a lot of the times I'm doing my stage planning. So I would say that it was great.
With PCC, it's mind-blowing how counterintuitive it actually is with the movement. Right. So when you come from pistol to PCC, you have it in your brain to do things a certain way, and you don't see all your options. Where with PCC, with it being longer and having more mass, it is very counterintuitive a lot of times how you move through a stage.
Yeah, the lack of maneuverability. I feel like a lot of people talk about PCC like it's it's easier to shoot a rifle at this type of match, and a lot of times I don't find that. It's a lot easier for me to stick my gun around a wall like this with my hands versus having to do it with a rifle. So yeah, the rifle manipulations and then the footwork in order to get to the positions and out of positions efficiently is definitely different than shooting a pistol. And I'm going to be the first one to tell you that I have no experience really with a pistol when it comes to shooting USPSA. So I usually will defer to Keita on that one.
I actually talked to Grant about this the other day because he recently started shooting PCC. How now they're building stages to even the playing field between PCC and pistol by making awkward positions to get the rifle around that are much easier for pistol. So it sort of evens the scoreboard a little bit.
Yeah, and definitely noticed that in Aruba on a couple of the longer stages. There were some tough pistol shots that were easier for me, but then on some of the smaller stages, some of the movement to get around with the rifle was definitely more difficult. So And then I noticed that at Area 8 also, they did a great job at putting a lot of like extremely difficult left leans in. And if you're not practicing your weak shoulder, it shouldn't really ever be a weak shoulder, in my opinion. You should just be proficient with both of them. But if you weren't practicing that, that was going to be an extremely tough match for you with a rifle. And then when I did my stage walkthroughs, I also did it like I had a pistol in my hand.
Oh no.
Just holding a pistol in my hand, like, wow, this corner is so much easier if I just had a pistol and I didn't have this rifle. But, you know, at the end of the day, yeah, it's definitely a different game. And a lot of people I know PCC is newer and most people don't really understand it yet, but until you actually shoot one at a match like an Area 8 or like an Aruba or something that's a little bit more technical, you don't really respect it or appreciate it for what it is. It's a completely different game. So,
and ironically, just before this match, I had you practicing left shoulder shots.
Yeah, right. And shooting on the move, both of which came in handy at that match. So, yeah.
And you did really well.
Yeah. No, I struggled a little bit day one, but came out day two and I was extremely happy with my second day performance, that I was able to bridge the gap between me and Marco. And at one point I know I had the lead and I'd given it up with a couple stages to go due to a couple stupid mental errors, but you know, that's what keeps you coming back. If they're all perfect, it'd be boring. So
absolutely. And with all that pressure of traveling and getting there, it's really a different game. With the mental game is so important at that point.
Right. And I mean, you know, I'm newly sponsored. So Da Vinci Machining actually this year, we started, working together a little bit where I'm now representing them. And yeah, there was extra pressure due to the fact that I was there for them. So I felt like, you know, if I'm here to represent you guys, I really wanted to do well. It wasn't just me going to a match that I had, you know, paid for, and it was actually for something. So yeah. So when you talk about the pressure, especially when you travel and you definitely don't want to DQ out of that type of match where you've put so much into it. It's the pressure was a little bit more real, but I feel like it wasn't because of the shooting necessarily. It was more because of what went into getting there.
Yes, and I actually have a section on that in my next book, Train Smart, under match pressure and how to deal with match pressure.
Right.
How to mitigate that before you even get there.
Looking forward to seeing those points.
All right, Grant, you've done some training with me over the last couple of years. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, so I first heard about, 2018 I started shooting, 2019 kind of new to the game. And the way I would describe it is I can shoot really fast and I can get to the times of my competitors, but then just my hits they're not anywhere near there. Or I can slow down, I can get the hits, but then, you know, my times suck and I basically end up at the same kind of point, whether I miss quickly or whether I'm shooting accurately slowly. So then on Facebook, I see that there's this movement coach coming to South Africa called Kita Bussy. Never heard of you, never heard of anything. So it was quite expensive. I did have to basically pay off the class fee because I really wanted to do it. And I thought, okay, well, you know, the shooting is okay. I can get to that, but the movement, I have no earthly idea what I'm doing here. So I need someone to help me. So yeah, pay that off, went to the class, and everyone said it was kind of a bad idea because it was 1 week before nationals. And I was like, well, you know, let's go for it. So took the 2-day class. My feet hurt something terrible afterwards. Kind of spent the next week gestating over it, went to nationals and actually ended up winning standard division. So that was actually just, thanks, man. That was actually pretty awesome. One of the nice things as well was bumping into Kita at the nationals, because you also shot it in PE there, and being able to pick your brain with stage planning and that, and realizing that, yeah, you look at stages differently than the rest of the people. Like you'll chat to the top competitors and you can't really walk through the stages in IPSC. You can kind of just look at them from a distance. And I did that the day before the match. And then when I bumped into Kita, she was like, well, you know, why don't we just do that and that? And I'm like, yeah, none of the top guys actually thought about doing that. So definitely the way you look at stages is completely different. And yeah, that actually, I think one of those stage wins that you gave me advice on took me over the line as well. So funny how that works. But yeah, so since then I've kept sending you videos. We've kept doing dry fire and shooting training. And it's funny when you send a video to Kita of just you shooting the gun, And she
No
responds
target in
with,
the video.
no target in the video, just basically a selfie of you shooting. And she responds immediately with, "That third shot was a Charlie, wasn't it?" And you're like, "But it was a close Charlie." But she knows that just by looking at the way the gun's behaving in your hands. So it's quite interesting, and I'm been gaining quite a lot of very useful shooting advice from Keita's coaching.
I really enjoyed that trip to South Africa for a lot of reasons, but what really struck me the most was at the awards ceremony. After everyone got all their awards, I saw everyone from my class winning their divisions. And they all brought me up to the front of the room where they were doing the awards ceremony, and they all hung their medals around my neck. And that, I don't know, I almost cried. It's so much to me.
It's awesome.
Well, let's be honest.
I appreciate you doing the class in Aruba after the match then, if that was the case. So thank you.
Well, yeah,
they
we
took a
definitely
lot of time
attribute our successes to your class the week before, because most of the guys that actually did very well there took your class the week before.
Yeah, that was really exciting. Very, very rewarding as a coach. I thrive on helping other people improve. I mean, I like to shoot. It's fun to shoot. But my passion is seeing my students succeed.
Yep.
Well, we're trying our best.
Certainly trying our best. Yeah.
So let's talk about IPSC versus USPSA. Mike, you just shot your first IPSC match. You normally shoot USPSA. What was different for you? And keep in mind, Mike is shooting PCC.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, for me, I would have to say the three main things. The first one was the stage planning, where you're not allowed to walk past the rear fault line. I thought that was a pretty difficult aspect of trying to tell what you would be able to see from a certain angle. So I felt like going into my stage planning day, which is usually the day before that, I was really looking for like 2 or 3 plans potentially per stage, given what I thought I'd be looking at downrange. So I thought that was a little bit more difficult. Still not terrible, because at the end of the day, I felt like IPSC is a little bit more technical and straight up. Like you could see that this is pretty much the way everybody's going to shoot it. But in that, obviously target arrays and what you're going to take from, if you have to add a transition or take a transition away, that was a little different for me. So that was more like IDPA for me, but wasn't too bad. The other thing is I usually shoot with no belt and an untucked shirt. And so like, for me, that's like a comfort thing, because like when I'm running around and twisting around, like just don't really want my shirt to be tucked in and be restrictive. And then shooting USPSA, I can have up to whatever rounds in my magazine that I want. So having a 32 round mag and then having to store it in a magazine pouch, that was a little bit different for me. So you have to tuck your shirt in, and you have to wear whatever you start the match with, which is the same rules in USPSA, but they don't specifically tell you that you have to take your magazines out of a mag pouch. So I usually run my 53 round mag in my gun, and then I have a 33 in my back pocket just in case something goes wrong. And I usually get through the day like that. But those couple things were probably the most, I wouldn't say uncomfortable, but just, the most different for me. I mean, obviously you're not taking a sight picture or doing any of that, but as long as you could remember not to do that and get a penalty before you actually shoot the stage, it's not the end of the world. As long as my sight's on, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I would say that those were the biggest differences for me. I know that there's a couple more, but never really got, into those, like, running outside the fault lines kind of things. But yeah, so.
In USPSA and IPSC, you're required to have belt loops. I believe the minimum is 2 in USPSA, and IPSC is at 4, Grant?
I don't think it's really specified, or I haven't actually seen it specified, but yeah, you need to have a proper shooting belt.
And in USPSA and IPSC, you are required to have a rig on, or a shooting belt of some sort, for both sports. So as far as
I guess nobody ever really says anything to me when I don't wear one. I have no issue with that. And actually just taking the RO class last weekend, I double checked with George Jones, actually super smart guy when it comes to USPSA, but yeah, absolutely fine. Doesn't say it has to come from a reloading device, but your pocket technically is, or a reloading pouch, but your pocket could be one. So
Right, but you still have to have a belt on, even if you don't use it.
Is that true? Well, I'm waiting for somebody to tell me that when I get to a big match.
Well, maybe they can't tell because you have your shirt untucked.
Well, see, maybe that's why you have to have your shirt tucked in IPSC.
Right,
Because
so they can see it.
So, maybe, there's a purpose for the rules, I suppose.
So
Sometimes.
a difference
Well,
there.
Sorry.
A difference there for pistol. Oh, sorry, Grant, go ahead.
Sorry, I don't want to cut in. I think the biggest problem is at local club shoots, and that even here, that the rules aren't necessarily enforced. So you'll get away with a lot of stuff at club shoots, and then when guys who haven't shot big matches end up going to those big matches, it's, oh, hang on now, I haven't got this or need to do this or that, but no one's ever told me at a club shoot before. So
right,
Same
it's
here.
kind of a thing of mention it, but obviously don't be a, well, go home because you don't have the rig. Mention it, but we need to actually tell people.
Yeah, it's the same way here. So the difference with pistol for USPSA and IPSC is now they've changed the rules in USPSA where we no longer have hip bones. So in USPSA, you can have your holster and your magazine pouches anywhere on your belt you like. You can have a magnet. And in IPSC, those have to be behind the hip bones. And if you have a magnet on your front pouch, when the magazine is attached to the magnet, it must be behind the front point of your hip bone.
Correct.
So that's if you use the magnet. If you're not going to use the magnet, then it doesn't matter. But you can't move anything on your belt in IPSC. So they do an equipment check where they actually write down on a piece of paper where every magazine is, where your magnet is located, where your holster is located. And if something moves, then you get in trouble. So if you didn't have a magnet in the beginning, and then you have one on later on in the match, you put it on for a certain stage, that's a disqualification. Or not a disqualification, but a bump to open.
Welcome to open, shoot minor, have fun.
And that actually happened to me.
Where do they bump you when you shoot PCC?
You can have it anywhere in PCC.
Yeah.
Shoot for no.
Well, yeah, because PCC is completely open at the moment. So yes,
Right.
you can have your mags and magnets anywhere you want. And it doesn't
Yes,
matter.
I'm talking about production.
Yeah.
Or production optics. So in USPSA, it's called carry optics. In IPSC, it's called production optics. So for production optics and production, you have to have it behind your hip bones. Now, one time in the Philippines, they were talking to me and taking selfies and things like that, and they forgot to write down that I had a magnet and the location on the belt. So when you sign that piece of paper, make sure you check that everything is exactly where it should be before you sign it, because I didn't look. And then later on in the match, the RO said, "You have a magnet. It's not on here." Luckily, I wasn't using it anyway, so I just took it off and I never touched it. So
yeah, there's got to be a way to argue your way out of that one.
Yeah. I was like, they were taking selfies. I'm sorry. That's no excuse. You need to know the rules.
Yeah. Knowing the rules, especially after taking this RO class, knowing the rules, not only is it going to make me a better RO, it's going to make me a better shooter, because there are definitely a lot of little intricacies in that book. And I'm sure it's the same way in the IPSC rule book, that like you can definitely call for certain things or not weasel your way out of stuff, but just using the rule book and applying the rule book, can definitely help you throughout your day. If you have a call not go your way that you definitely don't agree with, as long as you follow the right procedure. But nobody's going to tell you that. That's one thing that it says. Like, nobody can say, "Hey, well, you should do this and then say this." Like, well, okay, but no. So if you know the rules, I mean, that's a huge part of the game.
Another interesting thing is the awards ceremony. In USPSA, the award ceremonies used to be like a red carpet event, and that's sort of how they are for IPSC. So they have rules for what you can and can't wear to the award ceremony. No flip-flops, no cargo shorts. If you're wearing
casual, as I believe the
right,
word
it's a dress-up event.
Well, I broke the flip-flops rule. That was for sure. And I did not bring any attire because I was not prepared for that. But I was told that if you wear a team jersey, that's okay. So I wore my shooting shorts, like a pair of black shooting shorts, and my jersey, and then all I had was flip-flops. So, but nobody said anything about the flip-flops. So maybe everybody's just not enforcing the rules. I appreciate that because I was.
Well, it was
Were the shooting
at a
shorts at
pool.
least covered in sand?
Yeah, no, they were a clean pair. One clean pair.
Yeah, it depends
Yeah.
where you go. If it's, if it was the world shoot, that wouldn't fly.
Yeah, which I saw is in Thailand. I was actually just looking at that before we got on this.
Yeah.
Was kind of interested in, at least checking out what it would take to get there for next year for 2022. I saw it's at the end of the year, which I don't know how it would work out with work, but I was going to talk to Dave about that from Da Vinci, see if we can do something with that. So
let's talk a little more about viewing the stage from behind the fault line. So in USPSA, the day before a major match, you arrive, you look at all the stages, you walk on the stages that aren't occupied by staff shooting, and you can actually walk through them as much as you want. You can walk around the outside and look at all the targets and where they're located. You can watch the staff shoot in either sport and see how the movers move, but you can't activate the movers yourself in either sport, or that's a disqualification. So in IPSC, we had to stand behind a certain point. At some matches, they'll have it roped off. But at this match in Aruba, they just said, don't cross the rear fault line.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of move side to side to see what you can see and hopefully see other people shoot so you figure out where things are available from. Now, if you ever build stages, that actually really helps with IPSC because you know how a stage builder's mind works and where you would make things available from. So I think that for me, because I build stages, that gives me a little more insight when I'm coming up with plans and trying to see the perspective where things are available from and where they're not.
Yeah, now that's what I was talking about before. Like I felt like I needed 2 or 3 plans walking up to actually go through the walkthrough. So like I know Grant, you shoot IPSC all the time. So is it easier for you to like dissect the stage from behind it? Because I felt like I was back in IDPA, like struggling a little bit.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, no, I am quite jealous of the fact that you guys can do that, a day or 2 days before the match, because the match book and the way the stages are laid out are never, ever going to be the same. So it is definitely nice and a nice advantage to be able to walk through the stage and write in the match book, okay, well, this target's actually up here, can be seen from this position and engage it like this. So you can better plan out your stages before the day. So on IPSC, as you know, you rock up, you walk, you kind of look through the stage. You can some stages are easier than others. You get a big 32 round stage that has a whole bunch of barricades, a whole bunch of barriers in it. You don't necessarily are able to plan the stage. You can kind of get an idea of what you're going to do, an idea of how you're going to start the stage, but you can't actually finish that until you're there and you get your 5-minute walkthrough. And the problem with the 5-minute walkthrough is you have an entire squad of sometimes up to 12 people. You're all trying to do your stage walkthrough. You're trying to get your stage plan. And if it's a complicated stage, everyone's bumping into each other. So it basically, you may end up only getting one walkthrough on the stage. Yeah. That is a skill on of itself that you need to be able to, if I only have one walkthrough on this large 32 round stage, maybe it won't be the best plan, but can I walk through it once, get the plan in my head and be able to visualize it and execute it? That's how you basically win some of those stages, because the other guys may miss a target, and I've done that, so I'm totally guilty. We completely just run past the target because you only got that one walkthrough. You didn't see that target. You erroneously counted 32 rounds, and yes, the ROs walk you over and say this target wasn't shot, and it is quite demoralizing, if I do say so myself.
Yeah, well, maybe that's what lends to like the follow the herd strategy in IPSC. Then like everybody kind of shoots the same thing, because if you've seen other people shoot it that way and then you only have 5 minutes to actually see it yourself, you can't really get creative with, well, maybe I've seen other people doing this, but maybe if I backed out of here, you don't really have the time to actually do that. So maybe that's where
that's definitely a thing, especially when the top squads are usually back to back. So the top production squad will be right next to the top standard squad on that. So inevitably you end up waiting and watching the next guys. So the thing about that is you're able to see, okay, well, they ran the stage this way. Clearly, that's the fastest way that they've figured it out. However, I've got 2 more rounds in them, so I can actually take a better risk. Maybe that way, let's see when I walk up to the stage and look at it, maybe a risk going a different direction with 2 extra rounds rather than having to do a reload here, kind of, for instance, as an example. But yeah, it's definitely a skill being able to just basically rock up and do that. Also, one of the other key differences is in USPSA, you're allowed to drop the hammer and basically dry fire an array. So even on shorter stages, you can basically just go through and dry fire the array, pick your spot on the targets, see where you want to move your eyes. In IPSC, you can't drop the hammer. And if you want to check your red dot, kind of, they're allowing a bit of leeway that you can check your red dot on the first target, but that doesn't always happen often. So
that's not what I was found.
No,
anyway.
That's illegal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's
It has to be toward the
that.
ground.
Yeah, pointed at the ground.
Down around.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like there's a lot of people in USPSA that will do that, and then they step up and blow the stage. So like I don't know about, they'll sit there and they'll literally it'll be like we always call it the GM walkthrough, or the GM make ready, where it literally takes 5 minutes. So I don't know. To me, at that point, the thing I like about it is if you don't have your plan down at that point, in USPSA, going through it the day before and then rehearsing it that morning before you actually start shooting for the day, then I feel like you didn't do enough pre-planning. So if you're going to stand up there for 5 minutes and take a sight picture on every single target before you actually make ready, I feel like that's a little bit over the top to me. But it is nice to be able to just practice that first target with the rifle, like, okay, that's what it's going to feel like. And then you're down and it's stand by, beat, and you get that the first target usually is a little bit nicer. But yeah, I don't necessarily see a benefit to taking a sight picture or going through it in your head with every target, especially when you can only move one step in USPSA. So I can't actually, when I get the make ready command, I can't. Yeah, 2 steps. I thought it was only 1 step from what I've heard at this point. 2 steps is a P, I believe. You should check that. I'm pretty sure. I feel like I'm the rules guy now after the RO class. But I'm pretty sure it's 1 step. So yeah, you can only take 1 step. So if you haven't, if you're going to stand in one position and then just do a sight picture of you doing a mental walkthrough in your head, like, I guess, but to me, it's a little bit excessive on the time. And as everybody knows, we all like to get out of there before dark. So if there's ways to actually make the game go faster, I feel like that would be one of them, is limiting the make ready to the standby to be like 20 seconds, put your mag in, get your stuff ready, and let's get it going. But yeah, I almost blew that a couple times in Aruba, where I before one stage specifically, I always pick my gun up to get my first target before I put it down. I got halfway and went, nope. And I put it right back down. But yeah, no, I didn't ever break that rule in particular, but yeah, taking a sight picture easier.
Another difference with the make ready is when you draw the gun, you can't, with a pistol, of course, or with the PCC as well, with mounting, you can't do it like a draw, like you're practicing a draw. You just have to take it out without it looking like a draw. The other thing you can't do when you load the magazine, you can't load it like a reload, like you're practicing a reload.
Who's to say that that's very subjective, in my opinion?
Yes, it's very subjective.
That's hard to enforce a rule that is so broad, in my opinion. So
but that's only in IPSC.
Right. Well, from stage to stage or RO crew to RO crew, you're going to get differences in what they think is you actually practicing a draw versus you taking your gun out. So that's one that I feel like almost works in the shooter's benefit, because if it's so broad, then I can argue the crap out of that rule. So I love rules like that aren't very clearly stated.
So if you guys are going to the World Shoot, something to keep in mind when you go to Asia is the way they do their walkthroughs is very different. You know how we all stand in sort of a conga line and we all take our turn getting one full walkthrough for IPSC? In Asia, they don't do that. It's like ants on a watermelon. So what you need to do is get your plan generally. Of course, you don't want to cement that plan in the day before until you see it and get your 5-minute walkthrough. So get your general plan, pick out what part of the stage you're not sure about. When they say go for your 5-minute walkthrough, go straight to that spot and look at it and figure it out. Then try piecing it together, and you might have to piece it together backwards, or from the middle first, or front and then end and then middle. Wherever you can get your eyes in.
Everybody is so slow, is what you're telling me, that you can't just do one full walkthrough sometimes? Is that what you're getting at?
No, what I'm saying is everyone ambushes the stage in all different places all at the same time in Asia. They don't walk through standing. They
Got
don't
it.
line up and walk through. In fact, they laugh at us for doing that.
Interesting. Yeah. That's weird. Yeah,
So-
definitely see that in Aruba, but I guess we were on a squad with all US people. So
So
yeah.
if you do shoot it, I would recommend at a local match or something like that, take a look at your stage, get an idea what you're going to do. When they start the 5-minute walkthrough, go straight to the spot you're not sure about, and then start piecing it together from there. So you can start practicing that before the world shoot.
Got
'Cause
it.
that's how it's going to be in Asia.
Yeah.
If you're
That's
on
right.
a super squad with all, Americans, then you're going to get your walkthrough. But if it's mixed in, then you may not.
All right.
That's
See,
something
good
to
advice. Yeah.
keep an eye out for.
Thank you.
Okay, something to look out. Thank you.
Taking notes.
Yeah, absolutely. Always learning. Always learning. So
So something else that we do in USPSA that you cannot do in IPSC is run outside the lines.
Hmm.
In
Yeah.
IPSC, if you step out, you have to get back in the same spot. They did change a rule where now you can jump over a corner unless it's considered to be a shortcut. So usually what they do is if it's a fancy range, they'll put a nice planter with some pretty flowers there so you can't jump over it. If it's not such a nice range, then they'll probably put a stack of tires there.
Roger that. Yeah, no, and I feel like that's a rule that really limits creativity as far as your stage planning goes. Like, so I feel like Grant, the fact that you can't run around a wall and get to another position, I've used that multiple times shooting USPSA, where if your momentum is carrying you outside of the fault line, it's faster to just keep it going and go around that wall and step back in around the wall versus trying to back out, get your momentum going the other way and get around it. So I feel like that's another thing that could limit creativity in stage planning when it comes to IPSC. But how do you feel about it, Grant?
Yeah, it definitely turns some stages into very like myopic. You're going to go to A and B and then C, and everyone's going to do that because you physically can't do anything else.
Right.
That would be nice to run outside the lines. It would create that interesting dynamic where you'll see some people do that. Basically, we've gotten very good at shooting something efficiently inefficient.
Yeah,
So
you're good at your entries and your exits, that's for sure.
Yeah, you got to get good. You got to get good at that because you're going to be doing a lot of them because you can't. If it's like, for instance, shaped like a T, you can't run right, then run left, and then just keep that momentum forging you forward to the front. You got to stop and you got to get that momentum back to move back to basically where you started. So, I mean, it's part of the rule book. You're gonna have to do that. Don't do the USPSA shooter thing where you immediately go into the first IPSC match and you immediately run out the fault lines, and then every shot you fired afterwards is a procedural. And that's not a good match winning strategy. Let's just say that.
Yeah, that was one thing that was in the back of my head on one particular stage that we had in Aruba was to not run outside the fault lines. But yeah, right before we shot, we were all telling each other, make sure you don't run outside the fault line. So we were all good there. But yeah, there wasn't very many opportunities that I would have necessarily done it at that match. And it was kind of the same setup at Area 8 here recently with the IPSC, more IPSC. See, I keep saying IPSC, USPSA. They are technically the same thing. We're a branch of IPSC, but it just seems that it's a little bit less restrictive in USPSA overall.
Well, yeah, and another thing, IPSC matches obviously designed around the fact that you can't move outside the fault lines. I think if that was the case, then you would see more USPSA stage designs leaking into IPSC where you could shoot it kind of like that, but you also could run outside the lines, or even better, you could have this one box at the start and you got to run to another box. And that's also quite a fun thing that we don't have because you've left the fault lines. So we don't have those stages where you have 3 different boxes that you have to move to.
I never even considered that. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we never did start in a box and then run somewhere else. I didn't even think about that. But yeah, that's see, like why so restrictive? I don't know. It seems like IDPA rules to me. It's fun when you run from there to there.
Well, yeah, especially we have done stuff where it's like man versus man as a fun club shoot thing, where you have to run to a box, and it does create that interesting dynamic of if your foot's not completely in the box or your other foot's still on the ground outside the box, who's getting the procedural type of thing? Did you shoot too soon? And that's a quite interesting element that comes with being able to run outside the fault lines.
Yeah.
So something different about IPSC versus USPSA is their activator sequences tend to be much more complicated. they will have really small steel, like this big, and they'll paint them all different colors. So sometimes it'll be a little brown square with a brown background, and it's really hard to see. They also have a lot of swinging plates. They have bobbers that go up and down behind no shoots and go down like a slide.
See, that's cool to me. I wouldn't mind shooting that if that's strictly an IPSC thing. I mean, I've seen actually
It's not strictly
the
IPSC,
swinging
but
plates is fun. I've only shot that at local matches, but I think, I think the problem with plates in USPSA is the rule is if you hit a plate and it doesn't go down, it's an automatic reshoot, stop and reshoot. So I feel like you don't really see very many plates there because they try to keep the match rolling. And if you have a plate spin on you 360, the rule is if you hit the plate, it is supposed to go down. So if it doesn't go down, it just slows everything down. So
yeah, so another interesting difference I've seen is on the short courses. Our short courses in USPSA typically are you stand in a box and you shoot these targets right in front of you, and that's it. A short course in IPSC, they have some really, really good ones, especially I've seen them in Europe where there's a little bit of movement, not much, just a little more than a box, but it's more complicated. They have walls set up. You have to kind of twist around and see things, and really interesting activator sequences worked in there where sometimes you have to activate on one side of the stage and then engage the mover on the other side of the stage and get there in time before it goes.
Yeah, it really becomes like a timing game at that point. And they're really good at making sure that the timing is the same for each shooter, so you don't get that excuse. But also, some of the stages are designed in a way that you can kind of see a target if you do a hard lean, but are you going to guarantee that you're going to get those good hits? So do you want to move that extra step and get good hits, or do you feel confident in your abilities to basically, conjoin yourself and get a lean on there? And then, was watching Eric Rafael shoot one of those short courses where it's 2 activators and 2 targets and 2 bobbers.
Yeah, I saw that too.
Everyone saw that, and that was just that is just incredible.
Right.
And yeah, Mike, I don't know if you've seen that video yet.
I haven't seen that particular. I've seen him shoot a lot at his practices where he does a lot of like timed swingers and stuff like that, where it's like you got to activate, shoot, otherwise you miss him. So I've seen him. I haven't seen that particular video though. No.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive. You must actually go check it out. But yeah, that's kind of basically, I think that's a European thing though, to be honest, that whole intense sequencing events with activators. Haven't really shot anything in Russia or Asia yet. So
I feel like it's something that if you're the MD of a match, would you want to, that's something that you got to be pretty confident in to put that in and not have it screw everything up and have to throw something out. Do they throw stages out in IPSC if stuff like that doesn't work?
Yeah.
They really, try not to, but they will pull a stage if it's just not working.
So, I mean, to throw that into a big match where you got people coming from all different countries, that's definitely a risk. So if you're not building that and knowing that it's going to work perfectly, I could see why that's not something that you see very often, so.
Any other differences?
It's definitely more of a technical route. It's not just run up and shoot fast. It's run up, get the sequencing, make sure your feet are exactly in the right spot.
Very
which
positional.
Is also another thing that we're seeing is more positional matches and more low ports and weird angled ports at a weird position. With a kind of, you can run up to the port and get all the targets, but you can also kind of position yourself perfectly and get a stage. So what happens is you see a lot of guys, top end shooters, actually shooting the stage completely differently. At one of the Cape Town Nationals, the top 3 guys in the standard squad, we saw one of the stages. It was a very technical positional stage. All 3 of us shot it completely differently. Whether we didn't necessarily try to, but all 3 of us had different ideas on how the stage should be shot. It happens. But at the end of it, we actually compared our times. All 3 of us were basically within 2 or 3% of each other. So at that stage, it didn't actually matter.
It comes down to execution.
Yeah.
So, Mike, you just took an RO course. What is the rule about when your finger can go on the trigger coming into a position?
Well, you have to be engaging targets. So your finger can't be on the trigger, I believe, if you are moving, which is defined as more than 2 steps or changing body position. So if you're going from like a high port to a low port, you have to take your finger off the trigger in between. I don't know if there's a specific rule that says something about like how early into a position, like 3 feet before the position, you're allowed to put your finger on the trigger. I think it's more, it's something that's a call for an RO. I believe it's subjective. I don't think that there's actually a specific rule, but yeah, as long as your finger's off the trigger while you're moving, and then as you're coming up, getting your gun up, you can throw your finger on the trigger if you're about to start shooting targets, but any other time. And then you're not allowed to have your finger on the trigger when you're reloading either. So yeah, other than that, you're good to be blasting, which is something I've never actually struggled with, thank God, because I know a lot of people that have trouble with breaking that habit of keeping their finger on the trigger. It's just something that's instinctual for me to as soon as I'm moving, my fingers on the side of the gun, because you get more control with the gun anyway. That way, when you have your finger inside the trigger guard, I feel like you're losing a little bit of control with the gun, So I feel like it actually helps you shooting when you're moving. It helps your moving when you get your finger outside and put it on the side of your gun. So
IPSC has the same rule. 2 steps before you're shooting, you can start getting your finger on the trigger if the gun is indexed on the target or where the target is going to appear. So
depends on the RO.
Grant,
as always, yeah.
I had an interesting experience at South African Nationals with this. They're not used to seeing this there. Everywhere else in the world, that's totally normal. But that wasn't normal in South Africa.
Yeah, I'm getting quite a lot of finger calls because obviously you're training me and I'm 2 steps before getting into position, getting my finger on the trigger, and I'm prepping the trigger to that wall. I am getting some comments about, maybe your finger was on the trigger a little bit too soon. Please watch out for that.
Wow.
So
you have to be in the position before you can put your finger on the trigger. Is what you're telling me? You have to be at the corner. With
you
your
have
foot
to
on the line.
Fingers out until you are engaging the target.
Yeah, sights need to be on the target before you put your finger on the trigger.
Who's to say what my engaging the target routine is? Maybe that's getting my gun up. Is I'm starting to engage the target. Am I? Like how can you argue that? Like I don't know. Like what does the rule actually state on engage? What is the definition of engaging a target? Is what I would look up in the rule book and see that would be my argument. Like, is there a definition of that? Because if there's not, then that is me engaging the target. It just takes me a little longer than everybody else, and I have to do it before I get to the fall line.
Okay, write that one down.
You can tell he's a school teacher and gets a lot of excuses from his students.
Absolutely, yes. So yeah,
well,
I don't know. I'm always looking at nitpick stuff like that. So I mean, if they're really gonna call you on it, I mean, you have to be ready to kind of say, like, how can you argue that? Because I mean, if the rule is if they say the rule is your foot has to be on the fault line before you can pull the trigger, well, that doesn't. I mean, okay, then that's different. Then my foot wasn't on the fault line.
Again, if you go to the World Shoot in Asia, you have to be getting your finger on the trigger about 1 to 2 steps before you want to be shooting. Otherwise, you're going to be behind and you're not going to win.
Right.
Yeah, the minute you clear that barricade, the minute your sights cross into that target, the shot needs to go. Because I believe I timed it. I think I did speak to you about it. It's about 0.2 of a second per engagement.
That sounds about right.
Per target. Yeah. And that's like almost 12 targets on the stage.
Yeah.
It's a lot of time. And people are always wondering, where am I losing time? Where is this time just sinking away? And it's small things like this that are adding up.
Yep.
Yeah, it's not just one big thing.
Yeah, I've told people that so many times, and they're like, "Well, what are you saving? A quarter second?" I'm like, "Yeah, but you're doing it a lot of times in a row. Like that's you don't understand. Right. Like when you're like, how'd you beat me by 30? It's like because I did the quarter second save every time, and you did not. So yeah, no, it's tenths of a second. That's really what we're looking for in this game. So
these guys, I feel bad for the guys in South Africa because they're coming from a culture where it's not accepted to do this, and they're jumping into a world shoot where it's expected that you do this.
So it's just in South Africa that you
I haven't seen it anywhere else in the world. That's the only place I've seen it.
SA, like everywhere else, it's okay to do it, but only in South Africa. I'll have to watch out for that if I ever come shoot a match there.
Well, yeah,
and they'll let you know. They'll let you know in advance. That was a real struggle for me to not do something that I'm in the habit of doing and that is accepted in the US and everywhere else I've shot in the world, to consciously, before I shoot every target, no, don't do it.
Yeah.
I was literally fighting my finger the entire match.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about that. That would be very awkward for me also.
It was very distracting.
That's where you just got to be fast enough that they can't see you. So if you're,
But it was a
faster,
really
no
cool
idea.
match. I very much enjoyed
That was
it.
the plan.
Now,
Yeah,
something
no, I actually liked that
interesting
match as
in
well, but I did win it, so I can like it.
There you go.
something interesting in Australia. If you ever shoot a match there, they don't paint the barrels.
So how do they tell
if
if it's a
you,
through and through?
what did you learn about grease rings in your class?
All right. Well, see, this depends on who you talk to on grease rings, because technically, so George's a big fan of grease rings. Me too. But I have been proven wrong one time. I forget who actually showed me something where they completely proved me wrong with the whole grease ring thing. But yeah, I mean, just because something hits something doesn't necessarily mean that it's not going to leave a grease ring, right? So like it could pass through something and still leave a grease ring. And I'm always like, well, that's just not possible. But then I was shown a clear barrel hit. I believe it was a barrel hit one time, and there was still a grease ring on the target. So it's like, how do you discern that? But yeah,
It can go the other way as well.
How do you deal with through and throughs if you don't paint the barrels? How do you tell if you have a partial or a?
They don't.
Interesting.
So if it even touches the barrel, that's it, because it's so full of holes, you can't prove that it wasn't a full penetration.
So if it touches the barrel, it's a no hit, is what it is. Even if there's something on the target. That's interesting.
So you got an alpha on that edge, and you can't hit an alpha on that edge unless you shot through the barrel. So that's a mic.
Why don't you guys just paint your barrels? There you go. Problem solved.
It was definitely another cultural difference that I didn't know about going into this match, but it's the way it's always been done there. So when people come in from other places, there are definitely cultural differences at every match. That's
I mean, I feel like that's another thing that's not necessarily a hard thing to change if you're coming from a USPSA background to shoot IPSC. If you know that going into the South Africa match, where hey, if you hear a barrel hit, you're not getting that hit, because you know when you hit a barrel, you can hear the distinct difference. So like that'd be something that in your mind that you could switch over. I feel like, and be like, okay, if I hear a barrel hit, just shoot again.
Right.
So
yeah. If I had known, then absolutely, I would have done that. And
yeah,
I made the mistake of saying, well, how do you know if it was a full penetration in the barrel or not if it's full of holes and it wasn't painted?
And what they said,
that was a big no-no.
We don't care. It's still a miss.
Yeah. And then at that point, I realized it's just the shooting culture there, and I was coming in from the outside and just didn't know what I didn't know.
Right. Which I'm glad that I had the guys on my team going into Aruba and a few other people that were a little more experienced, because that was my first international match that I had to, bring all my stuff for. So yeah, I was a little bit perturbed when I wasn't able to take my gun to my hotel and do some dry fire the night before. I was like, oh, you guys are literally going to keep my gun and then only show up to it at the range. Like I was kind of hoping to bring it over to the range today and do a little sight in, but nope, you are not allowed to have your gun until you actually get to the match, which was like that was interesting for me. It's like, who's going to let me do my naked dry fire at night before I go to sleep?
Yeah, so let's talk about the travel part of going to Aruba. What did you have to go through to get there?
So I've flown domestically before with my guns, and all I really had to do was one extra step, which was I had to go to the airport the day before, or a couple weeks before, only to go to the customs office and have them check my serial number on my gun, just to say that I'm leaving the country with that gun, going to that country, and then I'm bringing the same one back. But past that, it was pretty similar to any other flying I've done.
It's only a declaration. It doesn't even, so we don't have a firearms license in the US like they do in the rest of the world. So they just want to see something with a government stamp on it and your serial number and your name. So all it is the customs form 4457 that you have to go and fill out, and they stamp it, and that's what they want to see, but it really means nothing except that you brought it in with you and you're leaving with it.
And the suggestion I would make to somebody would be, because I actually had to go there twice, because I was told one time that don't bring your gun into there, and I was like, okay, but then they want you to bring your gun with no magazines, and then preferably locked up in like the case that you're gonna fly with it in, and that's like, because then you got to wheel it across, usually like where you park, and then walk into the office, and
Yeah,
obviously
and definitely
not
put it
cool.
inside of a bag or something so it doesn't look like you're carrying a firearm, because
Right.
people do freak out about that.
Right. So as long as you keep everybody comfortable, usually they were okay with that. And then flying, I just, the only thing that was different for me when I actually stepped up to the ticket counter was having to deal with the lady for the import permit from the match, which was in Dutch, because Aruba is a Dutch province. It took me a little bit of time and a couple forwarded emails to her boss's boss, in order to have them say that I was okay to go, because they originally wanted me to have that in English. And I was sitting there saying, well, I can call the guy now if you would like and have him send it in English if they make that. But at some point it was okay. So yeah, so the import permit at the ticket counter was a little interesting, but past that, it's the same TSA checks that you would normally do and all that stuff. And then when your gun gets there, you got to go through customs, obviously, but really the process was smooth. And I think that was more due to the match director and the match staff being at the airport, and they were ready with everybody that was coming. And so I think they helped that process along more than if nobody was there to help you. But
so
really,
in order to fly internationally with a gun to another country, you have to have a reason to be there. So a sports shooting competition, you are allowed to bring a firearm. You need to have your official match invitation printed and signed. You need to have forms filled out for whatever country you're going to, and it's different for every country. So the match director will always get those to you, and they'll check it and make sure it's filled out properly. Usually you need your gun and serial number, how much ammo you're bringing, obviously your name, birth date, maybe your passport number, things like that on there. And you bring all that with you to the airport so that they know you're approved to bring this gun into the country, or they won't let you bring the gun on the plane. You can get on the plane and take your flight, but you're not bringing your gun with you. That happened to Matt Hopkins once.
not ideal when you're going to a gun match. Yeah.
I heard you do need one of those.
Yeah.
So the other thing is,
have you ever flown to the US, Grant, with guns? Because I'm sure when you came to the US, you're probably like, well, this is extremely easy compared to whatever I have to do back at home.
No, well, I mean, it's nice because we get these things. That's an actual firearms license.
it makes it easier.
Now, the thing is, if I wanted to fly internationally, I'd have to get an import permit from the South African Police Service. The problem with that is it could take 4 to 6 months to get something like that. So the thing is, when we were sitting around in June waiting for them to eventually cancel the World Shoot this year, we're sitting around thinking, well, even if they say it's going ahead, the chances of us actually being able to get the permits to take our guns over may not even come in time for the November match. So it's already too late.
So that's a one-time thing then. So you get that export permit for the one time you're going from there to there. It's not like you have one for 10 years or whatever it may be.
No, yeah, it's per thing.
So you got to know you're going to a match pretty far in advance and have that set up. Then that's kind of a nightmare. Yeah.
Well, it's just because that our police service is very inefficient, and it takes 6 to 8 months to just get the license, and all the applications are thrown in with that, and that is also import-export applications with normal license applications. So,
wow, that would be a big turnoff for me if I had to go through all that every time I wanted to fly somewhere with my gun. So, wow.
Yeah. So anywhere we go, any internationally, we need that.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, Mike, another thing is in some countries, you're not allowed to take possession of your firearm. Aruba is one. If you fly to Russia to shoot a competition there, they have some good ones in Yekaterinburg. And they will actually have someone from the range meet you at the airport, take possession of your firearm, and take it directly to the range. They take possession of it. In other countries, you can have a sponsor. So if you're staying with someone who has a firearms license, in New Zealand, for example, they can do this. So when I went to New Zealand, I had a sponsor who took responsibility for me and my firearm, and it had to be kept in their safe at all times. It could only be in the car to drive to the range and from the range. We couldn't stop anywhere else. It's kind of like being in New York.
Yeah, no, stay out of New York. I'm from New Jersey, so I'm not much better, but definitely better than New York. Yeah.
Yeah, when international people come to South Africa, you'll get a temporary license. Basically, it's just a piece of paper, but it's essentially the same thing as our card, and you're allowed to take possession of the gun keep it with you, as far as I know.
Yes,
Right.
and that's the other option is a temporary firearms license. I know Canada
And then,
has that. You guys have that. Where else have that? I can't think of it. I don't know. There are a few different countries that have the temporary firearms license, which is another application process you have to go through and get approved. So for these
Yeah,
countries, typically it's a little more paperwork, but you get to have your gun.
Yeah, it's also a couple months in advance thing as well. So it's not a,
Yes.
oh, I'm going to go shoot a match next month in South Africa. Like, you better borrow a gun when you get here, because you're not bringing yours.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there are some countries where you have to go through the consulate in the US to get all the paperwork filled out and approved, and you have to mail them your passport if you don't have one near you that you can just drive to. Like for the Czech Republic, if you go shoot a match in the Czech Republic, you have to contact your consulate for the Czech Republic and fill out all these forms with them. They have to physically look at your passport. So for me, the nearest one would be Chicago, which is 5 hours away. So I would just mail it. I think Max Leograndis just drove there. It was like a few minutes from his house.
Oh, you get those kind of breaks when you're that good, you know. So everything seems to work out. So
yeah, but then he flew through New York, which I told him not to do.
not something I ever suggest. You know, I mean,
So
there are
if you
ways
do
around
fly
it.
through New York, don't fly through New York with guns. But if you do, and there is a delay, do not take possession of your firearm. Get on the next plane to literally anywhere but New York
It's worth it.
and just go.
No matter how much money that ticket costs.
Okay, right. So those
You
last
will
minute
go to
tickets.
prison.
Yeah, New York's a little rough. I shoot with a couple guys from New York, but you know, they're all great guys. But yeah, no, they nobody really agrees with any of the restrictions because they're all a joke. But I mean, you know, every state has their own thing here in the U.S. and we all do what we got to do. You know,
Even
so.
when I fly into New Jersey, even though I can fly in there with a firearm, I still mail my firearm to gun sitters in advance because it's so close to New York. If I were to get redirected, I'd be screwed. And that actually happened once. And Pixie was on the plane with me. We got redirected to New York because of a bomb threat. And thank God I actually mailed my firearm there in advance.
That's
or I would have been screwed.
Yeah, like I usually fly out of Philadelphia. I will never fly out of New Jersey either. But yeah, so I'll drive the hour and a half. But I never really
it's worth it.
what would happen. It's always seems to work out. Philly's a big enough airport that I don't really think, you know, it would be extremely bad luck if you got delayed or diverted somewhere else that wasn't a gun state.
Another thing to keep you from getting arrested, when you check in at the gun counter, they have to put this little tag inside your gun case if it's a big rifle case, or on top of your pistol case if it's inside your luggage. And this tag is a declaration form saying you declared that you have a firearm. You're not trying to sneak it in. And you announced it to the person at the front desk. They sign it, you date it, stick it right on top of your gun in the suitcase or inside your rifle case. And there was one time I was flying through Australia to New Zealand, almost got arrested because they did not declare that there was a firearm when they switched airlines. So the suitcases were on one airline, and then we switched to another airline to get through the rest of the journey. And the one airline didn't communicate with the other airline. So the best case is to stick with one airline, but the police had to actually go open the case, find that little declaration, and then everything was fine. But if I had forgotten,
that's a good piece of advice there. That's always the awkward part when you know, I always like you walk into the ticket counter and there's just everybody else going to wherever they're going for vacation with their family, and they ask you to open up your firearm right there, and you got to unlock all the locks and open it up, and here's my gun and everything, and that's always a little weird for me. But
never let them touch it.
Yeah, no, especially those people. The TSA people are not so bad in the US. I mean, at least, you know, that's what they do. They handle stuff like that usually. But yeah, a lot of times the people at the ticket counter are pretty ignorant when it comes to a lot of the gun rules, which is like on my way to Aruba, I was standing at the ticket counter for about an hour and 45 minutes before they let me up to my gate because they just weren't 100% on all this paperwork, even though it's something that I was allowed to do. So Make sure you leave yourself enough time. That's one thing I'm going to tell you when you get to the airport.
Yeah, it took, I think, a full 3 hours for Pixie and I to get through with the firearms. But luckily, I knew all the rules, so I was able to explain it to them and walk them through the process. And then they just called a supervisor to check and make sure it was okay.
What airport was
So
this? What airport was this?
This
Have you
was
ever been-
MSP.
Have you ever been to Philadelphia? Do you know the people behind
Yes.
the counter? You do not explain
Yes.
anything to them behind the counter because then you know more than them. And then that was not a good start to that conversation.
No,
So-
what I do in Philadelphia is I walk up to the counter, I smile, and I say, "Hey, how are you?"
Yeah. And they say, I'm not
And
doing
after
great.
they say they're at work, whatever, then you say, "I'm sorry to make your day a little harder, but I have a firearm to check."
Right. That's what you're doing. Yeah. And they make sure you know that too. So I never try to educate those
That's
people.
what
I
you
just try
say.
to- I try to be as helpful as I can without trying to step on their toes, if you know what I'm talking about.
And also you say, "I have a firearm unloaded in a locked hard side case." So that lets them know that you know what you're talking about.
Even if they don't.
Right. So international travel, your gun has to be in one bag and your ammo has to be in another bag. But within the US, it can all be in the same bag. But the ammo has to be in factory cases, and Dillon cases do count, like the plastic cases with all the little holes for the bullets. And actually magazines count as factory cases as well.
You have to tape over your mags if you load them, don't you? You got to put like a piece of duct tape or something over them.
You don't have to, but if you don't want to end up with loose rounds in your bag,
Yeah.
they don't like that. I've had it happen where one of my Dillon cases popped open and there's ammo loose everywhere and nobody said anything, but it's supposed to be contained. So now I actually put a piece of tape around my Dillon boxes as well, or a rubber band or something.
Probably good advice.
Yeah, and for international travel, the firearm has to be double locked. So you put on a trigger lock or a barrel lock on your pistol and then put it in a hard side case and lock the hard side case. Plus they want the suitcase locked most times as well. And every airline's a little bit different with their requirements.
Interesting. Yeah. And I didn't have a trigger lock. I have a Pelican case with the 4 locks. That was more than fine for them. So nobody said.
Yeah, and that's fine for Aruba. If you're flying out of the US, it's fine. But when you're flying back to the US, they might have different rules. So just make sure you have a barrel lock or a trigger lock or something with you in case the airline you're flying out on requires it.
I definitely did not have one of those, so I will bring one next time I travel internationally. That's good.
Yeah, and I
One of the
always keep
questions-
extra locks in my suitcase because I always lose them.
I have a question. Has any of the TSA agents ever opened your gun and gone, "Oh, that's cool"?
Oh, every time.
Yes.
Every time.
Okay.
They're all gun people just like us. Yeah, they like the guns too. Their job dictates they have to take it a little more seriously, but yeah, they think it's cool too. So usually you get a story about what they shoot and when they shoot
Yes.
and all that stuff. So the TSA people are very okay. Yeah. It's getting to the TSA people that takes a little bit of time. So
Well, I
Cool.
think we got to wrap this up. We're running out of time here.
it's been so fun though.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
has
thank
been
you guys
pretty
for
fun.
coming on and talking about this. This was cool.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, we should
definitely.
do it
Thank you
again
for having me.
sometime.
We should. We totally should. Something else. There'll be another podcast idea, I'm sure.
Absolutely. So yeah, anytime, Keita. Anytime you want to do it, I'm in. So
All right,
Yeah,
cool.
me
it's
too.
been fun. Thank
You
you.
guys have a great day. I'm going to Wisconsin section to hang out.
Enjoy. Hey, say hi to
Oh.
who is Josh going to be out there? Is Josh going to be or
I don't know.
he should be.
We'll
he's
see.
got natties coming up. He should be practicing. So we'll see.
He has
Yeah.
been. He's looking really
Matches
good
are
with that
not
PCC.
practice.
No, nationals are not practice. So it's been a little difficult this year with the primers and stuff. But practice has been a tough one, right? I don't know how you're doing it, but practice has been a little bit difficult for me. I've been shooting a lot of matches locally, and that's been and dry fire. But past that, it's getting hard to afford primers and all that kind of stuff. So
We have such a small market here. We imported quite a large batch. We actually haven't gone through any of that. The powder's becoming a little bit of a, it's kind of a feast and famine thing. There'll be a whole bunch, it'll be really well priced, and then it'll slowly degrade, it'll slowly sell out, and it gets a little bit more pricey, and then there'll be another batch that'll come and replace that. So we actually haven't run out of primers. Powder's a little bit harder to find, but it's not impossible. So sorry, but it happens when you only have like 3 million gun owners in a country of 60 million. So
Yeah, right.
versus your guys' appetite.
Yeah, no, I agree. It'd be nice when those come back, but it was good. It was nice meeting you, Grant and Keita. It was great.
Very nice meeting you, Mike.
And yeah, hopefully we get to do it again at some point. So
Yeah,
you guys
sounds
have a
good.
good afternoon and good luck at Wisconsin, Keita. And I'm going to make some ammo. So
All right, have fun.
You go.
have a good one.
Make well. All right. Cheers. Have fun.
Bye.
And I'll chat to you guys
See ya.
soon. Bye.
Bye.